I became my ex-husband's caretaker the day his doctor called about his dementia diagnosis. Everyone thought I was a fool nursing the man who'd left me for his younger assistant and stolen our architectural firm. But as Robert's mind deteriorated, strange patterns emerged. Missing money, altered medications, his new wife Vanessa's convenient absences. During rare moments of clarity, Robert would clutch my hand and whisper, "Find the recording, Emma." I hid the truth. For 8 years, I searched while watching him slip away. When I finally discovered what he'd hidden, proof of an elaborate conspiracy that had destroyed us both, I realized our divorce had never been what it seemed. They'd underestimated me, seeing only a bitter ex-wife. They never expected I'd be the one to expose everything they'd worked so hard to bury. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. I was celebrating my promotion at Anderson, and right when my phone buzzed. Normally I'd ignore calls during dinner, but something made me glance at the screen. Unknown number. I excused myself from the table where my colleagues were toasting my new position as creative director. "Hello, is this Emma Wilson?" The voice was clinical, detached. "Yes, this is she. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Dr. Pearson from Boston Memorial. I'm calling about Robert Wilson. You're listed as his emergency contact." My hand tightened around the phone. "Ex-wife," I corrected automatically. "We've been divorced for 7 years. There was a pause. "I understand, but you're still his emergency contact. Mr. Wilson has been diagnosed with early-onset dementia. He's been asking for you specifically." The restaurant noise faded to a distant hum. Robert was only 58, the same age his father had. Then, when he'd started showing symptoms, though Robert had always insisted he wouldn't share the same fate. I remembered how he'd obsessively completed crossword puzzles and memory exercises, convinced he could outrun genetics. "Mrs. Wilson, are you still there?" "It's Ms. Hayes now," I said, reverting to my maiden name. I went back to it after that. "Divorce? Ms. Hayes? Then, would it be possible for you to come to the hospital?" Mr. Wilson becomes quite agitated when confused, but he calms considerably when we mention your name. I closed my eyes, remembering our life together. 15 years of marriage. The architectural firm we built from nothing, Wilson and Hayes Design. Our Victorian home in Beacon Hill, with its sloping hardwood floors and temperamental radiators that clanked like percussion instruments in winter. The garden I'd lovingly tended while Robert sketched. New projects on the wrought iron patio set we'd found at an estate sale. And then there was Vanessa, 28 years old when Robert hired her as his assistant, 29 when I found them. Together in his office after hours, the lipstick on his collar hadn't been but a clue I'd ignored for months. "Ms. Hayes, I'll think about it," I said finally, and hung up. When I returned to the table, my celebration had lost its sparkle. I begged off early, claiming a headache. That night, I called my sister Claire. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, when I told her about the call after everything he did to you. "Let his trophy wife take care of him. Apparently, she's been missing his appointments." The doctor seemed concerned. "Not your circus, not your monkeys, Emma. He left you with nothing but debt and heartbreak. Remember how he managed to convince the court that you weren't entitled to half the business? Your business?" "I remember," I said quietly. The divorce had been brutal. Robert claimed I'd been uninvolved in company decisions, despite the fact that I'd handled all the interior designs while he focused on architecture. In the end, I walked away with a fraction of what I deserved, forced to start over at 45. "Promise me you won't get sucked back in," Claire demanded. "I promise." I lied. The next morning I found myself in the hospital elevator pressing the button for the 5th floor. I told myself I was just being decent, checking on someone I once loved. Nothing more. Room 512 was dimly lit. Robert sat in a chair by the window staring out at the Boston skyline. His once robust frame had thinned, and his dark hair was now completely silver. When I entered, he didn't turn. "Robert," I said softly. He looked over slowly, his blue eyes cloudy with confusion. Then, suddenly, they cleared. "Emma, yes, it's me." He reached for my hand with trembling fingers. "You came. I wasn't sure you would. Dr. Pearson called me." Tears welled in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Emma, so sorry. I need to fix what I broke. Before I forget everything." "What do you mean?" But the moment of clarity had passed. His eyes grew distant again. "Is it time for breakfast? Martha said she'd make pancakes." Martha had been his mother, dead for 20 years. Outside his room, Dr. Pearson explained the situation. "The disease is progressing, faster than we'd expect. He'll need constant supervision." "What about his wife, Vanessa?" The doctor's expression tightened. "Mrs. Wilson visits occasionally, but she seems overwhelmed by his care requirements. As if summoned by her name, a woman appeared at the end of the hallway. Still beautiful at 36, Vanessa Wilson had maintained her model-thin figure and flawless style. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant updo, and her cream pantsuit probably cost more than my monthly rent. "What's she doing here?" Vanessa demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "Mrs. Wilson, I called Ms. Hayes, as per your husband's records. He's been asking for her." Vanessa's perfect features hardened. "Well, she's seen him. Now she can go." "Actually," Dr. Pearson said, "your husband has been much calmer since Ms. Hayes arrived." "I don't care. I'm not comfortable with my husband's ex-wife hanging around." She turned to me. "Haven't you done enough?" I almost laughed at the absurdity. "I didn't do anything, Vanessa. You're the one who broke up our marriage." She waved a dismissive hand. "Ancient history. What matters now is Robert's care." She turned back to the doctor. "I've been researching nursing homes. He's going to need more care than I can provide." "Nursing homes at this stage can be disorienting," Dr. Pearson cautioned. "Familiars would be beneficial for slowing his cognitive decline." "I didn't sign up to be a caretaker," Vanessa snapped. When I got home that evening, I found myself pulling out old photo albums. There, tucked between pages of happier times, was a set of blueprints Robert had drawn our dream house, the one we never built, a modern cabin overlooking the Atlantic in Maine, with walls of glass and a wraparound deck. We'd bought the land but never broke ground. The next day, my doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Sullivan from next door, bringing over a casserole. "I heard your ex-husband is ill," she said. At my surprised look, she added, "Small neighborhood, dear. Word travels." "He's got dementia," I admitted. "Early onset." Mrs. Sullivan nodded sadly. "My sister had it. Gone within 5 years." She patted my hand. "I never reconciled with her before she passed. Some ridiculous fight about inheritance. Now I'd give anything for one more conversation where she knew who I was." That evening, I received a panicked call from Vanessa. "Robert's gone missing," she said, her voice tight with irritation rather than concern. "The security system shows he left at 2 a.m. Have you called the police? They found him already. He was trying to get to your place. Can you come? He's agitated and keeps asking for you." I should have said no, should have maintained the boundaries Claire had insisted on. Instead, I found myself driving to the modern monstrosity Robert and Vanessa had built in Brookline, all sharp angles and cold surfaces. Nothing like our warm Victorian. Robert was sitting in the kitchen, a blanket around his shoulders despite the summer heat. When he saw me, his face lit up with recognition. "Emma," he said, taking my hand, "I made a terrible mistake. Please help me remember what I need to tell you." I stayed until he fell asleep. As I was leaving, Vanessa cornered me in the foyer. "This can't happen again," she said. "It's not appropriate." "Then hire him proper care," I replied. She hesitated. "I've been looking into options." Looking into options isn't the same as implementing them. 2 weeks later, Vanessa called again. Robert had fallen, refused to eat for days, and was becoming combative with the part-time nurse she'd hired. "I can't do this," she admitted. "I have business trips coming up. The firm needs attention." The firm Robert built. I couldn't help adding. There was a long pause. I was thinking, maybe you could help. Temporarily, you always had a way with him. That night, I called Claire and told her I'd agreed to help care for Robert temporarily. "Define temporarily," she demanded. "Just until Vanessa arranges professional care," I said. "A few weeks, at most. It would be 8 years before I returned." To my own life, the modern glass mansion Robert and Vanessa had built in Brookline was cold in every sense of the word. Where our Victorian had been full of worn leather chairs and overflowing bookshelves, this place was all white furniture and empty surfaces that collected dust but not memories. The moment I entered with my small suitcase, just enough for a temporary stay, I sensed something was wrong. The house was eerily quiet except for a distant television. Unopened mail littered the entryway, consumously official-looking envelopes stamped urgent and final notice. I found Robert in the sunroom, staring blankly at a nature documentary. He looked up when I entered, his expression politely confused. "Are you the new nurse?" he asked. "Linda quit yesterday. Said I was too difficult." He smiled apologetically. "No, Robert, it's me, Emma." His brow furrowed, then suddenly cleared. "Emma," he reached for my hand. "You came back. I knew you would." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't trust her, Emma. She's not what she seems." "Who?" Vanessa, but his moment of lucidity had already passed. "Is it time for my medication? The blue pills make me sleepy." The kitchen told its own story. The refrigerator contained 3 bottles of expensive champagne, a withered lime, and numerous takeout containers. A stack of medical bills sat on the counter, many stamped overdue. I was organizing them when Vanessa finally returned. laden with shopping bags from Neiman Marcus and Saks. "You're here," she said flatly. "I didn't think you'd actually come. I said I would." She glanced at the medical bills. "Don't bother with those. I have an accountant." "An accountant who's letting critical medical bills go unpaid." She set down her bags with an irritated sigh. "It's complicated. Robert's insurance is being difficult about some of the treatments. Speaking of which, his medications are in the cabinet above the microwave. Pill organizers labeled by day. He needs help showering. He gets confused about the water temperature." "Aren't you going to show me around? Go over his routine?" Vanessa checked her watch, a diamond-encrusted Cartier that probably cost more than my car. "I'm late for a meeting. Everything you need to know is in a binder in his room. Robert's office is off-limits confidential firm business." She was gone before I could ask anything else. The binder turned out to be a thin folder containing outdated prescription information and a hastily scribbled daily schedule that included precise times for Robert to be resting in room during what I would later discover were Vanessa's frequent gatherings with friends. That first week was a steep learning curve. Robert alternated between docile confusion and frantic agitation. He often woke in the night, convinced he needed to meet clients or finish blueprints for deadlines long past. During my third night there, while helping Robert back to bed after one such episode, I noticed dark bruises on his forearms. "Robert, what happened here?" I asked gently, touching the marks. His face clouded with fear. "She gets angry when I can't remember the numbers, says I'm doing it on purpose." He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't tell her I told you. She'll hide them again." "Hide? What?" But he'd already retreated into confusion. "Is it time for breakfast? Martha makes the best pancakes." The next morning, I tried to access Robert's home office to look for insurance information. The door was locked, and Vanessa had taken the key. When she returned that evening, I asked about it directly. "We need his insurance details to sort out these medical bills," I explained. "I told you, I'm handling it," she snapped. "The insurance company is being difficult about covering experimental treatments." "What, experimental treatments?" Dr. Pearson didn't mention anything beyond standard protocols. Something flashed in her eyes, annoyance, maybe fear. "We consulted specialists, top neurologists who don't take insurance. It's expensive, but worth it." A few days later, Robert's former business partner Marcus stopped by. He seemed startled. "To find me there? Emma, what are you doing here? Helping with Robert's care?" I led him to the sunroom where Robert was having one of his better days. Robert stood, shaking his hand warmly, though I could tell from his eyes he wasn't entirely sure who Marcus was. After their visit, Marcus pulled me aside in the kitchen. "How long have you been back in the picture? Just a few days?" Vanessa needed help. He frowned. "I bet she did. The firm's been in trouble since Robert stepped down. There are rumors, double quotes. What rumors? Financial irregularities, clients calling about invoices for work never completed, projects mysteriously over budget." He lowered his voice. "Vanessa's been running things behind the scenes since Robert's symptoms started, before they went public with his condition." After Marcus left, I found Robert in his room, staring at an old photograph of us in Maine. "We were happy there," he said with unexpected clarity. "At the cabin by the lake, under the northern lights. You remember that?" He nodded slowly. "I hid something there, something important, in case I forgot." His eyes locked with mine, briefly sharp with intention. "The place where we saw the northern lights, remember that, Emma?" Before I could ask what he meant, his eyes clouded again. "Is it time for my pills? The blue ones make me sleepy." That night, I searched the house while Robert slept, and Vanessa was at what she called a business dinner. I found prescription bottles with dosages that didn't match Dr. Pearson's instructions. Some pills had been replaced with different medications. Entirely. When Vanessa returned after midnight, I confronted her. "These aren't the medications Dr. Pearson prescribed." She snatched the bottles from my hand. "Those are from the specialists I mentioned. They're more aggressive treatments." "Then why replace them in the original bottles? Why not tell me about them?" Her perfect features hardened. "Listen carefully, Emma. You're here because Robert responds to you, but don't forget your place. You're the ex-wife. You have no legal standing here. I'm his wife and I have power of attorney. Question my decisions again, and I'll hire someone else, someone who understands their role." The threat hung between us. We both knew Robert became severely agitated with strangers. New caretaker would devastate his already fragile condition. "Now," she continued with forced pleasantness, "I'll be away for the next few days. Business in New York. The refrigerator is stocked and the housekeeper comes on Tuesday." After she left, I tried calling Dr. Pearson, but was told he no longer handled Robert's case. The new doctor, someone named Westfield, couldn't discuss Robert's treatment with non-family members for the next month. I established a routine that seemed to comfort Robert. Mornings in the sunroom, afternoons listening to classical music and Mozart eased his anxiety. Sometimes during these sessions, fragments of his old self would emerge. "I never meant to hurt you," he said during one such moment. The depression was I couldn't see clearly. Vanessa seemed like an escape, but she was the trap. "What do you mean, the trap?" But the moment passed, his eyes growing distant again. Yet these glimpses into his awareness kept me going through the increasingly difficult days. One afternoon, I discovered Robert had been hiding small objects, a watch, silverware, cufflinks in various places around the house. When I gently asked about them, he became uncharacteristically sly. "Insurance," he whispered, "for when she takes everything." Vanessa's business trips grew more frequent and longer in duration. She'd return with shopping bags but no evident work materials. Sometimes she'd host lavish parties, parading Robert around briefly before instructing me to take him upstairs when he inevitably became confused by the noise and strange faces. During one such party, I overheard a conversation between Vanessa and a tall, distinguished man named Thomas. "He had another episode yesterday," she was saying. "Kept talking about Maine and hidden evidence." "That property needs to be liquidated," Thomas replied, "before he remembers what's there." I retreated before they could spot me, my mind racing. The Maine property, the land we'd bought for our dream house, Robert had mentioned hiding something there. That night, I searched Robert's belongings while he slept. In his sock drawer, I found a small notebook. Inside, in increasingly shaky handwriting, were Robert's early attempts to document his symptoms. The final coherent entry sent a chill down my spine. "Bank accounts changed again. V says I approved. It last week, but I don't remember. $250K missing from Cayman account. Must talk to Howard about new will. Don't trust V with power of attorney anymore. Need to protect assets for EMS future when I'm gone. M could only be Michael, Robert's son from his first marriage. Michael had sided with his father during our divorce, believing Vanessa's manipulated evidence that I'd been embezzling from the firm. We hadn't spoken since. The next morning, Vanessa announced she was selling the Maine property. "It's just sitting there empty," she said over coffee. "We need the liquidity for Robert's care." "I thought his medical trust was substantial," I countered, remembering the separate account Robert had established years ago, specifically for potential medical needs, a precaution given his family history of dementia. Her smile tightened. "Medical costs add up. The experimental treatments aren't cheap." That evening, a violent thunderstorm swept through Boston. The power flickered, sending Robert into a panic. I found him in his closet, clutching an old photo album. "Emma," he gasped. When I crouched beside him, his eyes suddenly startlingly clear. "She's not who you think she is. Neither of them are. I recorded everything, Emma. I'm so sorry for what they did to you." "Who? Robert? What did you record?" His eyes darted fearfully. "To the doorway? Can't say. Not here. Not safe." He pressed a hard object into my palm, a key. For the truth, then, like a candle being snuffed out, the awareness vanished from his eyes. "Is the storm over?" "I don't like thunder." The key was old and tarnished, with no indication of what it might open. I added it to the growing collection of clues in a puzzle. I was only beginning to understand. 3 months into what was supposed to be a temporary caregiving arrangement, I'd settled into an uneasy routine. Robert's condition fluctuated day to day, sometimes hour to hour. Mornings were usually his clearest time. He'd sometimes recognize me, have breakfast with minimal assistance, even recall fragments of our past together. By afternoon, confusion typically set in, and evenings were often marked by noting increased agitation and disorientation as daylight faded. Vanessa's absences grew longer and more frequent. When she was home, she'd lock herself in Robert's office for hours, emerging irritable and evasive about the firm's operations. One morning while Vanessa was away, I was putting away laundry when I discovered a stack of official documents, hidden beneath her designer sweaters, property tax notices for their primary residence, the Maine property, and 2 other real estate holdings I didn't recognize, all showing significant arrears. Worse, there was a foreclosure warning for the Brookline house, dated the previous month. How was this possible? Robert Wilson had been one of Boston's most successful architects, with a portfolio of high-profile projects and investments that should have secured them financially for decades. The next day, I took Robert for his checkup with Dr. Mitchell, the family physician who'd treated him for years before his diagnosis. While a nurse was taking Robert's vitals, Dr. Mitchell pulled me aside. "Emma, I'm glad you're back in Robert's life. I've been concerned about his condition, about his care. Vanessa missed several important appointments last year. When I finally did see him, He wasn't receiving the treatments I'd recommended. She opted for ... double quotes. He hesitated. Alternative approaches. You mean cheaper options? I asked, recalling the unpaid bills. Actually, no. More expensive experimental treatments with unproven efficacy. I expressed my concerns, and suddenly she transferred him to another primary care physician. He lowered his voice. Emma, dementia doesn't typically progress this rapidly, not even early onset variants. Robert had a surprisingly lucid period later that afternoon. We sat in the garden, autumn leaves spiraling around us as he struggled to articulate his experience. It's like drowning, he said quietly. I can see the surface, see everyone moving around up there, but I can't break through. And then, sometimes, like now, I surge upward and can breathe again, but I know the current will pull me under soon. He took my hand, his fingers thin but grip still. Strong. I made so many mistakes, Emma, the affair. It wasn't what you think. You don't need to explain, Robert. It was a long time ago. He shook his head urgently. No, you don't understand. I was in a dark place. My father had just been diagnosed, and I was terrified the same thing would happen to me. Vanessa, she noticed, targeted me. What do you mean, targeted? His brow furrowed. She would bring me drinks after hours, strong drinks. And then there are gaps in my memory from those evenings. She'd show me photos of things I supposedly did, said ... things I didn't remember. This revelation stunned me. I'd walked in on them in his office, seen them with my own eyes, hadn't I? Before I could press further, Robert's lucidity began to fade. Is it time for my medication? The blue ones make me sleepy. That evening, I experimented with playing music from our early years together, jazz standards we'd danced to in our kitchen, classical pieces we'd seen performed at Symphony Hall. The effect was remarkable. For brief moments, the music seemed to part the fog in Robert's mind. Our first date. He smiled as the opening notes of Dave Brubeck's Take 5 filled the room. That little jazz club in Cambridge, you wore a blue dress. I was so engrossed in this unexpected connection that I didn't hear Vanessa return. She stood in the doorway, face tight with anger. What's going on here? Robert startled at her voice, his momentary clarity dissolving. Just listening to some music, I explained. It seems to help his recall. Turn it off, she demanded. It's too stimulating before bedtime. She strode across the room and switched off the stereo. You're not his therapist, Emma. You're his caretaker. Remember your place. Robert grew agitated, looking between us with confusion. Is something wrong? Did I do something wrong? No, darling. Vanessa's voice shifted to honeyed sweetness. It's just time for your medicine and rest. Emma was keeping you up too late. After settling Robert in bed, Vanessa confronted me in the kitchen. I don't appreciate you trying to manipulate my husband. Playing music he enjoys isn't manipulation. Don't pretend this is about his well-being. I see what you're doing, trying to resurrect your relationship with a man who's too confused to remember why he left you. The cruelty of her words stung, but I maintained my composure. Robert needs consistency and comfort. The music provides both. Her smile was razor-sharp. You know what? I think it's time we discussed a different arrangement. I'm considering a specialized memory care facility. Professionals who can provide proper treatment without emotional complications. You mean without witnesses? I countered, emboldened by what I'd been discovering. Robert becomes severely agitated with strangers. A facility would accelerate his decline, and you know it. That's not your decision to make. The next day, I met Robert's nurse, Diane, who came 3 times weekly to check his vitals and help with his more complex care needs. As we worked together, to bathe Robert, she whispered, I'm glad you're here. Mrs. Wilson has been asking about additional power of attorney options and end-of-life care. End of life. Robert's condition is serious, but he's not terminal. Diane's expression was grave. That's what I thought. She's also restricted access to his medical records. Even I can't see some of the specialist's reports anymore. Later that week, while helping Robert dress, he suddenly handed me a small key that had been hidden in his sock drawer. For the truth box, he whispered. At the lake house, don't tell her. Then, like a switch being flipped, he forgot the entire exchange, asking me what time breakfast would be ready. That night, I waited until both Robert and Vanessa were asleep before searching his personal belongings more thoroughly. In a hollowed-out book of architectural theory, I found a small leather notebook. Inside, in handwriting that grew increasingly shaky, Robert had documented his early symptoms and suspicions. October 3rd found strange pills in V's purse. Not my prescription. When asked, she claimed they were vitamins she was planning to suggest. November 18th, $50,000 missing from personal account. V says I approved wire transfer to specialist. Don't remember. December 4th. feeling unusually disoriented after evening drinks. V insistent on nightcap every evening. January 22nd. Thomas and V arguing in office. Heard my name, something about accelerating timeline and documentation nearly complete. When I entered, they stopped immediately. February 9th. Called Emma today while V was out. Needed to warn her. Forgot what I was saying midway. The final entry? Nearly illegible. Memory failing faster now. Must protect truth before too late. Recording with Howard, Northern Lights box. Emma will understand. The next morning, Vanessa announced she'd listed the main property for sale. The realtor says we should get above asking price. We'll need the funds for your specialized care. Specialized care? I don't understand. Robert looked at me, confusion and fear evident in his eyes. Don't worry about it now, darling. Emma, can you give him his medication? I need to take this call. She stepped onto the patio, phone pressed to her ear. Through the glass doors, I could see her expression shift from professional to intimate. She laughed, tossing her hair in a gesture that seemed incongruously flirtatious for a business call. That night, a violent thunderstorm rolled through Boston. The power flickered, sending Robert into a panic attack. I found him huddled in his closet, breathing rapidly. It's okay, Robert, just a storm. The power might go out, but we have flashlights. He gripped my wrist, his eyes suddenly, startlingly clear. Emma, listen to me. She's not who you think she is. Neither of them are. Who? Robert, Vanessa, and who else? Thomas. They've been working together from the beginning. I recorded everything, Emma. I'm so sorry for what they did to you. What did they do? I don't understand. His eyes darted fearfully toward the door, the divorce, the company. It was all a crash of thunder. Cut him off, and when he spoke again, the clarity had vanished from his eyes. Is the storm over? I don't like thunder. The next morning, there was no sign of the momentary lucidity he'd shown during the storm. He didn't remember our conversation or his cryptic warnings, but I couldn't forget them. 3 years passed. What had begun as temporary help had become my life. I'd sold my apartment, put most of my belongings in storage, and moved permanently into the guest house on Robert and Vanessa's property, a concession Vanessa had finally made. When it became clear that Robert's condition dramatically worsened, whenever I was away for more than a few hours, the guest house gave me some semblance of independence, a space of my own to retreat to during Vanessa's increasingly frequent parties. She'd transformed their home into a social hub, hosting lavish gatherings for Boston's elite. During these events, she'd insist Robert make brief appearances, parading him like a prop before discreetly signaling me to lead him away when his confusion became evident. After these forced social interactions, Robert would often collapse in tears, humiliated by his inability to follow conversations or recognize people he'd once known well. I saw their faces, he'd say afterward. They were looking at me like I was already gone. During these vulnerable moments, I noticed something curious. Robert's confusion seemed more pronounced around Vanessa and her friends than when we were alone together. One evening after a particularly difficult party, I gently confronted him. About it, Robert, sometimes you seem more present when it's just us, but around Vanessa you get more confused. Why is that? He looked around furtively, then leaned close. It's safer this way, he whispered. She's different when you're not here, Emma. I need to protect myself until it's time. Time for what? His eyes clouded. Is it time for my medication? The blue ones make me sleepy. These moments of startling clarity amid advancing dementia kept me vigilant. I began documenting his condition meticulously, noting patterns in his lucidity and confusion. Certain triggers seemed to temporarily improve his cognitive function. Music from our past, photographs of projects we'd worked on together, even specific foods we'd enjoyed during our marriage. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. At the guest house, Robert's son, Michael, now in his mid-30s, he looked strikingly like a younger version of his father. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, when he'd sided with Robert, believing Vanessa's manipulated evidence that I'd been embezzling from the firm. Emma, he said stiffly when I opened the door. I heard you were back. 3 years now. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. I'm here to see my father, he finally said. Vanessa mentioned he's having a good day. She's not here, I replied. She rarely is anymore. Something flickered in his expression, concern, perhaps anger. Can I see him anyway? I led Michael to the main house, where Robert was having tea in the sunroom. When he saw his son, his face lit up with genuine recognition. Michael, you've grown a beard. It suits you. The visit went remarkably well. Robert remained lucid throughout, asking appropriate questions about Michael's architectural work in Chicago, and even recalling details from their last conversation months earlier. I stayed nearby, intervening only when Robert occasionally lost his train of thought. As I walked Michael out afterward, he stopped at his car, visibly emotional. "He's different with you," he said quietly. "Better, more himself. I've known him a long time. I recognize the patterns when he's struggling." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture, so, like his father's, it made my chest ache. "I owe you an apology, Emma. I believed what Vanessa showed me. The financial records, the emails. I thought you'd betrayed him. What made you change your mind?" "Time, distance, working in the industry myself, and realizing some of those financial discrepancies didn't add up." He hesitated. "And Vanessa's been systematically cutting people out of Dad's life? Anyone who questions his care or her handling of his affairs? She tried to cut me out too, but Robert becomes too agitated without me around. She tried with me as well, scheduled my visits when Dad was having his worst days, controlled the medication timing, so he was sedated or confused when I arrived." His jaw tightened. "I only realized it when I showed up unannounced last month and found him perfectly capable of conversation. She arrived and insisted it was time for his medication. We stood in silence, absorbing the implications. "There's something else," Michael finally said. "I've been looking into the firm's finances, projects that were fully funded but never completed. Client accounts emptied for material costs that don't appear in any records. Could it be simple mismanagement? Maybe, but there's a pattern to it. And most of the irregularities trace back to one person, Thomas Bradford." The name sent a chill through me. Thomas, the distinguished man I'd overheard talking with Vanessa about the main property. "He's Dad's former business associate," Michael continued. "He came on board about a year before you and Dad split up. Vanessa brought him in, I remember. Investment specialist, wasn't he?" Michael nodded grimly. "And now he's handling most of the firm's finances while Vanessa serves as the public face." They single quotes, close. The implication hung in the air between us. A few weeks after Michael's visit, Robert suffered a medical emergency. I found him unresponsive one morning, his breathing shallow. When paramedics arrived, they determined he'd had an adverse reaction to his medication. This combination can cause respiratory depression, the ER doctor told me. "Who manages his prescriptions?" "His wife," I said. "But she's unreachable at the moment." The doctor frowned. "This is the third medication-related incident we've seen with Mr. Wilson in the past year. I'm noting this in his chart." When I finally reached Vanessa, she was at what she'd claimed was a business dinner. Her voice was slightly slurred, ambient music and laughter in the background. "So he's fine now. They're releasing him." "He nearly stopped breathing, Vanessa. These things happen with his condition," she said dismissively. "I'll be there in the morning." Later that night, as I sat beside Robert's hospital bed, I overheard a phone conversation from the hallway, Vanessa's voice, low and urgent. "It's becoming a problem." "No, she's constantly there, watching everything, ... We need to accelerate the timeline. She's getting too close to the truth." A chill ran through me. Was she talking about me? When Robert was discharged the next day, I began carefully tracking his medication, taking photos of each pill and comparing them with the pharmacy's descriptions. I discovered subtle discrepancies: capsules that had been opened and resealed, tablets that were slightly different colors than they should have been. One evening, I confronted Vanessa with my findings. "Robert's medication has been tampered with," I said, showing her the evidence. "These aren't what was prescribed." Her face hardened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm stating facts. His doctors confirmed these aren't the correct medications, and naturally you assume I'm responsible." She laughed coldly. "Be careful with your accusations, Emma. Remember your position here. I could have you removed for elder abuse. After all, you're the one handling his daily medication now." The threat was clear. She would frame me if I pursued this. "Think about how that would look," she continued. "The bitter ex-wife worming her way back into his life, only to harm him. Who would believe your version over mine?" That night, during a rare moment of clarity, Robert handed me a sealed envelope. "Keep this safe," he whispered. "Open it when the maple tree blooms twice." The instruction made no sense until I remembered the Japanese maple weed planted on our anniversary. Years ago, variety known for occasionally producing a second bloom. "In late summer, what's inside, Robert?" His eyes were startlingly clear. "Insurance, protection. Don't let her see you have it." The next morning, a new private nurse arrived, a stern woman named Heather, who announced she'd be taking over most of Robert's care. "Mrs. Wilson feels a professional should be handling the medical aspects," she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. I soon noticed Heather documenting everything I did with Robert, how long our conversations lasted, what topics we discussed, even how he responded to me versus to Vanessa. Michael confirmed my suspicions during his next visit. "She's building a case against you," he said quietly, as we watched Robert doze in the garden. "Vanessa's laying groundwork to remove you. Heather is connected to Thomas. Somehow, former employee or relative, I'm not sure which. Why now? After 3 years, something's changed. Michael glanced toward the house. The main property sale fell through after the inspection found structural issues. She's desperate for liquidity. 2 days later, I finally got Robert alone for a short walk in the garden. The June air was heavy with the scent of roses I'd planted the previous year. He seemed more present than he had in weeks, pointing out birds and remembering the names of flowers. I made a video, he said suddenly, his voice clear and intentional. With Howard, my lawyer? When the clouds were still just gathering in my mind? What kind of video, Robert? His eyes darted toward the house. The truth about everything. What they did to you, to the firm, to me. Where is it? This video. Fear clouded his expression. I thought it was safe, but she found something in my office. She was so angry. He trailed off, his awareness visibly receding. That night I found him in his room, quietly weeping. When I asked what was wrong, he looked at me with vacant eyes. I can't remember, he said, but it feels important. So important, and it's gone. I sat with him until he fell asleep, more determined than ever to uncover what Vanessa was hiding and what Robert had tried to preserve before the disease stole his memories completely. 5 years had passed since I'd moved into the guest house. 5 years of watching Robert's gradual decline, punctuated by those bewildering moments of clarity that kept me searching for answers. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging into the past if you know what's good for. You remember what happened last time you challenged powerful people? I stared at the message, a chill running through me. The reference to last time could only mean the divorce how. I'd lost my share of the architectural firm through what I now suspected was an elaborate frame-up. When I showed the message to Michael during his next visit, his expression darkened. This confirms they're worried. You must be getting close to something. But what? I've searched the house, documented the medication discrepancies, even spoken to former employees of the firm. I still don't have concrete proof of anything. Maybe that's because what you're looking for isn't here, Michael suggested. Dad kept mentioning the main property, the lake house. Before we could discuss it further, there was a crash from upstairs, followed by Robert's cry of pain. We rushed to find him on the floor of his bathroom, clutching his hip, face contorted in agony. The next few hours were a blur of ambulances, emergency rooms, and doctors confirming what we already knew aboard had broken his hip in the fall. During the surgery preparation, he drifted in and out of consciousness, repeatedly murmuring about the Northern Lights safe. As they wheeled him to surgery, I remembered our honeymoon in Maine, when an unexpected aurora borealis had painted the sky above our rented cabin. Robert had been so moved by the spectacle that he'd incorporated a lighting system mimicking the Northern Lights into the design for our dream house, the one we never built. On the lake property, Vanessa arrived at the hospital hours later, irritated at being pulled from a charity gala. When she attempted to bar me from Robert's room, the head nurse intervened. Mrs. Wilson, your husband has been asking for Emma specifically. Dr. Pearson has noted that her presence has a stabilizing effect on his condition. Vanessa's perfect composure slipped for a moment, revealing naked hatred before she recovered. Fine. But I expect to be consulted on all medical decisions. When Robert regained consciousness after surgery, he was unusually disoriented even for his condition. The orthopedic surgeon explained that anesthesia often worsened dementia symptoms, temporarily, but something in his expression suggested concern beyond the usual complications. With Robert hospitalized, I realized this might be my only chance to check the main property before Vanessa sold it. I told Michael my plan. It's too dangerous for you to go alone, he insisted. Vanessa clearly feels threatened. Let me come. With you? Someone needs to stay with Robert, I countered. I don't trust him alone with Vanessa, especially now. 2 days later, I drove north to the coastal property where Robert and I had once planned to build our future. According to the realtor's listing, Michael had found the sale was pending with demolition permits already approved for the new owners. My heart sank when I arrived. The small caretaker's cabin was still standing, but construction equipment surrounded the property. The site preparation for demolition had already begun. Rain began to fall as I frantically searched the cabin, looking under floorboards, inside walls, behind fixtures. Nothing. I moved to the boathouse, a small structure perched at the edge of the lake that had come with the property when we purchased it. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof as I methodically checked every inch of the dilapidated building. The fading daylight made it difficult to see, so I used my phone's flashlight to examine the weathered floorboards. Near the back wall, one board seemed slightly different from the others, the grain pattern. Interrupted, I worked my fingers around the edge and pulled. The board came loose, revealing a small cavity beneath. Inside was a metal box rusted around the edges but still intact. My hands shook as I lifted it out. Inside, I found a USB drive, financial documents showing systematic fund transfers from Robert's accounts to offshore holdings, and a handwritten letter addressed to me. But the video recording Robert had mentioned wasn't there. The financial documents painted a damning picture. Systematic embezzlement from both Robert's personal accounts and the firm, dating back to 6 months before our divorce. What shocked me most were the names on the wire transfers, not just Vanessa's, but Thomas Bradford and James Cooper, Robert's former financial controller. The letter, written in Robert's increasingly unsteady hand, was dated 3 years earlier. Emma, if you're reading this, my mind has probably betrayed me completely. I've hidden evidence of what they've done in multiple locations, not trusting any single place. The video confession is most crucial. It contains everything recorded when I was still legally competent. I've given Howard the only copy, with instructions to release it only under specific circumstances. I was a fool, manipulated by people. I trusted the affair with Vanessa. It wasn't what you think. They drugged me, created evidence, showed me falsified proof that you were stealing from the firm. I believed them instead of you. My greatest regret, I've established a trust. They know nothing about. The documentation is with Howard. If something happens to me under suspicious circumstances, he has instructions to deliver everything to the authorities. I'm sorry, Emma, for everything, Robert. I photographed every document before carefully replacing the box on the drive back to Boston. My mind raced with implications. The letter confirmed what I'd suspected. Robert had been deliberately manipulated into our divorce. But by whom and why? When I returned to the hospital, I found chaos. Robert had been transferred to a different facility without doctor approval. Michael was beside himself. She moved him while you were gone, he explained as we rushed to the car. Used her power of attorney to override the medical team's objections. Some exclusive memory care place in Brookline with strict visitation policies. The Brookmont Memory Care Center was more like a fortress than a medical facility, a restored mansion surrounded by manicured grounds and security cameras. At reception, we were informed that Robert could only have visitors during designated hours, and only those on the approved family list prepared by his wife. I'm his son, Michael said firmly. The receptionist checked her computer. Yes, Mr. Wilson, you're approved for Tuesday and Saturday visitations between 1 and 3 p.m. And I'm his caretaker, I added, Emma Hayes. Another check of the computer. I'm sorry, you're not on the approved list. It took 3 days and the intervention of Robert's longtime doctor to get me approved for limited visitation. When I finally saw him, my heart broke. He was heavily sedated, strapped to his bed for fall prevention, according to the staff. The vibrant connection we'd established over 5 years was buried. Beneath the pharmaceutical haze, a sympathetic nurse named Melissa slipped me information after my second visit. Mrs. Wilson has authorized an experimental treatment protocol, she whispered. Several of us have raised concerns about the aggressive medication regimen, but she has medical power of attorney. Can't the doctors overrule her if it's clearly harmful? Melissa's expression was grim. The facility's medical director signed off on it. He and Mrs. Wilson are ... friendly. Armed with the evidence from Maine and the new information about Robert's treatment, I confronted Vanessa at her home. She answered the door in yoga clothes, looking irritatingly serene. Emma, I was wondering when you'd show up. I know what you've been doing, I said, stepping inside without invitation. The embezzlement, the manipulation of Robert's medication, the offshore accounts. If I expected shock or denial, I was disappointed. She merely smiled, gesturing for me too. Sit. When I remained standing, she shrugged and poured herself a glass of wine. Let me guess you found Robert's little treasure box in Maine. I always suspected he'd hidden something there, but the property is so large and he became confused before he could tell anyone exactly where. I have proof. Financial records, transfer documentation, his signed statement about being manipulated into our divorce. Vanessa sipped her wine unmoved. And what exactly do you plan to do with these ... revelations? Go to the police. They'll see a bitter ex-wife trying to stake a claim on her wealthy former husband's estate. The financial documents. Those transfers were authorized by Robert's signatures. I'm sure experts will verify as authentic. You forged them. Prove it. Her smile turned predatory. And without the recording, Robert claims to have made, which, by the way, doesn't exist. You have nothing but circumstantial evidence and the ramblings of a man with documented dementia. Why? I demanded. Why go to all this trouble? Was it just about money? Vanessa laughed, the sound utterly devoid of warmth. You still don't understand. This was never just about money. This was about taking what I deserved, what people like. You and Robert are simply handed through privilege and connection. What are you talking about? Robert built his firm from nothing with family money backing him, she countered, with Ivy League connections opening doors. With you by his side, from an equally connected family. She leaned forward. Do you know what it's like to claw your way up without those advantages? I spent years watching people less talented but better connected leap ahead of me. So you decided to destroy our marriage, steal his company, and slowly poison him as revenge for perceived slights that had nothing to do with him personally. Something flickered in her eyes, perhaps the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her. I didn't start out planning to hurt him. The opportunity presented itself, and I took it. Thomas had the contacts, James had the access, and I had, she gestured to herself, the means of distraction. I thought of Robert, drugged and confused in that sterile facility. I'm not letting you get away with this. Vanessa's smile returned, confident and cold. You already have, for 7 years. And without that recording, you'll continue to do so. She stood, indicating our conversation was over. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a dinner engagement. As she showed me out, she added casually, by the way, I've already transferred most of the remaining assets offshore. Even if you somehow convince someone to investigate, there won't be much left to recover. And Robert's condition is deteriorating so rapidly. Such a tragedy. The threat was unmistakable. I left, shaking with rage and fear, but more determined than ever to find the recording Robert had mentioned if it existed at all. 7 years into caring for Robert, I felt time slipping away. His condition deteriorated rapidly after the hip surgery and subsequent transfer to Brook. My limited visitation rights meant I could only see him 3 times a week, always under supervision. I used my life savings to hire Patricia Lawson, a specialized medical advocate with experience in elder abuse cases. With her help, we documented the concerning treatment protocols and excessive medication, building a case to have Robert transferred to a reputable neurological center. The medication cocktail they're giving him is unusual, to say the least. Patricia noted, reviewing the records we'd obtained through medical records requests. Some of these combinations are known to accelerate cognitive decline rather than manage symptoms. After weeks of legal maneuvering, we succeeded in having Robert transferred to Boston Neurological Institute. Despite Vanessa's vociferous objections, the medical team there immediately revised his medication protocol, and within days, we saw improvement not in his underlying condition, but in his alertness and comfort level. Meanwhile, I continued searching for Howard Green, Robert's former attorney who supposedly had the recording. His office informed me he was on an extended sabbatical abroad. When I pressed for details, his assistant Jenny was hesitant, but finally admitted she'd maintained copies of recent correspondence. The night before Vanessa's planned departure with Robert, Michael and I used his old security credentials to access the building. The office was dusty and abandoned, filled with outdated furniture and rolled-up blueprints. What exactly are we looking for? Michael asked as we searched the space. A safe? A hidden drawer? Anything that could conceal documents or a recording device. After an hour of fruitless searching, I noticed a framed blueprint on the wall, the design for our never-built dream house. Something about it caught my attention. The measurements in one corner seemed slightly off from what I remembered. When I removed the frame, I found a wall safe behind it, concealed by the large blueprint. The combination lock had a note taped beside it in Robert's handwriting, where we began. The address of his first project, Michael suggested. No, I said, suddenly, understanding the date we met. I turned the dial to May 22nd, 87, and the safe clicked open. Inside was a weathered envelope addressed to me in Robert's handwriting. It contained a letter and a small card with login credentials for a remote digital storage account, secured with a security question only I would know. What constellation did we see on our first date? Cassiopeia, I whispered, remembering that night 26 years ago when Robert had pointed out the distinctive W shape of stars as we walked back to my apartment, 8 years after I'd first agreed to temporarily help care for Robert. His condition had deteriorated to the point where he rarely recognized anyone. The legal battle over the restraining order had delayed Vanessa's plans, but not defeated them. She'd rescheduled the Swiss transfer for the following week with Michael's help and a cybersecurity expert he trusted. We accessed the cloud storage account using the credentials from the safe. After entering Cassiopeia as the answer to the security question, we gained access to several encrypted files, including a video dated 3 years before Robert's official diagnosis. Should we watch it here? Michael asked as we sat in his apartment. We need witnesses, I decided. People who can verify its authenticity and contents without being connected to us personally. Patricia arranged for her legal colleague and a forensic accountant to join us the next day. As we gathered around Michael's laptop, I felt a strange combination of dread and vindication. Whatever this recording contained, it would either provide the evidence we needed or prove that Robert's statements had been nothing more than confusion. The video began with Howard Green stating the date and confirming Robert's identity and cognitive status, supported by a neurologist's recent evaluation confirming his competence. Then Robert appeared, looking tired but clear-eyed. "My name is Robert Wilson," he began. "I'm making this recording of sound mind and body, though I fear that won't be the case for much longer. I've begun experiencing symptoms similar to my father's, early-onset dementia, but there are periods of concerning memory loss that don't follow the pattern I witnessed with him." He detailed how he'd first noticed unusual gaps in his memory after evening drinks with Vanessa, which led him to secretly test his cognitive function and document the patterns. "I began to suspect my condition was being deliberately exacerbated. Blood tests confirmed unusual substances not prescribed by any of my doctors. The most shocking revelations came next." Robert meticulously documented how Vanessa and James Cooper had systematically embezzled millions from the company in his personal accounts using forged signatures and fraudulent investments. "The affair with Vanessa was orchestrated from the beginning," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I've since discovered she was deliberately placed at the firm by business rivals seeking access to proprietary designs and client lists." My hand started shaking as Robert described how Vanessa had systematically manipulated our marriage, including anonymously sending me fabricated evidence of infidelities that never occurred. "My greatest shame," Robert confessed, tears now flowing freely, "was believing Vanessa's claim that Emma had also been unfaithful. She presented doctored photographs and texts that, in my wounded pride, I never questioned before filing for divorce." The forensic accountant interjected, "This matches patterns I've seen in the financial documents you recovered." Classic long con approach. Robert's final revelation hit like a physical blow. "Vanessa and Thomas convinced me that Emma was embezzling from the company, presenting falsified evidence that led me to cut her out of the business entirely. By the time I discovered the truth, the divorce was finalized and Emma had rebuilt her life without me. My cowardice kept me from telling her the truth immediately, a decision I've regretted every day since." The video concluded with Robert making a legally binding amendment to his will, revoking Vanessa's control and transferring power of attorney jointly to me and Michael, along with restoring my ownership stake in the architectural firm. "In the event of my death or complete incapacitation," he finished, "I want the truth known about what was done to me and to Emma Hayes, the only woman I've ever truly loved." The room was silent when the recording ended. The forensic accountant was the first to speak. "This is damning evidence. Combined with the financial records you've gathered, it presents a clear case of fraud, elder abuse, and possibly attempted murder through medical manipulation. We need to move quickly," Patricia's legal colleague advised. "Take this to the district attorney and file for an emergency injunction blocking the Switzerland transfer." Within hours of our meeting, Robert suffered a catastrophic stroke that doctors later confirmed was likely induced by his medication. When we arrived at the hospital, Vanessa was already there, coldly efficient as she spoke with doctors. The gravity of Robert's condition became clear as the neurologist took us aside. "The stroke has caused significant brain damage. He's currently in a coma, and while he's stabilized, the prognosis for meaningful recovery is poor." We immediately filed the emergency petition with the evidence from Robert's recording. A judge granted the injunction, temporarily removing Vanessa's medical power of attorney pending investigation. When confronted at the hospital with the evidence, Vanessa's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. Her professional composure gave way to raw fury as she realized the extent of what Robert had prepared. "You think this changes anything?" she hissed, her perfect features contorted with rage. "By the time this makes it through the courts, there won't be anything left, and you'll never live long enough to see a trial." As hospital security escorted her from the building, the threat hung in the air, a final confirmation of everything Robert had revealed. Robert survived the stroke but remained in a vegetative state, showing minimal brain activity. Using our newly established legal authority, Michael and I transferred him to a specialized long-term care facility where his dignity would be preserved and his care prioritized over Vanessa's convenience. Justice moved more swiftly than Vanessa had anticipated. Attempting to flee the country, she was apprehended at a private airfield with offshore account information and Robert's original will, the one she had reported lost. Years earlier, the investigation expanded rapidly, with Thomas Bradford turning state's evidence in exchange for leniency. He provided details about the conspiracy that extended beyond what even Robert had known: manipulation of several major projects that explained the firm's mysterious financial decline after our divorce. As the legal proceedings unfolded, I struggled with complex emotions. The vindication of knowing I hadn't been paranoid or bitter was overshadowed by grief for the years lost to this elaborate deception. How much of my life had been shaped by others' manipulations rather than genuine choices? I visited Robert daily, reading to him from architectural journals or simply sitting beside him holding his hand. The doctors said he likely couldn't hear or understand, but occasionally his fingers would tighten around mine, a ghost of connection. 6 months after the revelations during one such visit, something extraordinary happened. As I sat beside him, reading about a new museum design in Chicago, Robert's eyes suddenly opened, focusing directly on me with unmistakable recognition. "Emma," he whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. I leaned closer, hardly daring to believe. "Robert, can you hear me?" His fingers tightened around mine with surprising strength. "I always loved you, Emma." The words were clear, deliberate, and filled with awareness that had been absent for so long. Then, like a candle guttering out, the light faded from his eyes. His hand went slack in mine. By the time the doctors arrived, Robert was gone, but he had given me the gift of a genuine goodbye. The legal proceedings revealed the full scope of Vanessa's deception, including her systematic isolation of Robert from anyone who might have recognized the inconsistencies in his cognitive decline. She had carefully cultivated relationships with medical professionals who would support her decisions without question, creating a protective barrier around her activities. During sentencing, I requested a private moment with Vanessa, needing to understand the person who had destroyed so many lives. "Why continue the charade for so long?" I asked. "You could have divorced him, taken a settlement, moved on." Her smile was chilling in its sincerity. "Because I deserved it all. I invested years in the plan, played the devoted wife through his disgusting decline. The payoff was mine by right, and you feel no remorse for any of it. My only regret is underestimating a failing old man's capacity for deception. I should have searched harder for that recording." She leaned closer. "But I don't regret what I did to you. You had everything handed to you: the perfect marriage, the successful career, the devoted husband. You never had to fight for anything. You know nothing about me or what I've fought for," I said quietly, and left without looking back. As Robert's estate was finally settled, Michael and I discovered he had secretly maintained the property where we had planned to build our dream home. After much discussion, we decided to develop it into a specialized care center for dementia patients, named in Robert's memory. "Dad would have liked this," Michael said as we reviewed the final plans. Using design to improve lives was always his passion. On the 1-year anniversary of Robert's death, I received a package from Howard Green, who had returned from abroad after Vanessa's conviction. Inside was a hand-drawn card Robert had apparently created during his early treatment. A simple sketch of our favorite park bench with the words, "Thank you for coming back to me," written in shaky handwriting. I began the walk home, carrying with me the final lesson from a man who had found the courage to face his mistakes before time erased his chance for redemption. That love, in its purest form, is not about what we receive, but what we're willing to give when there's nothing left to gain. But before you go, please tell us in the comments, what would you do if you discovered your life's greatest heartbreak was built on elaborate lies? Could you find the strength to seek justice, even after 8 years of pain? Like and subscribe for more stories of betrayal, redemption, and the powerful bonds that connect us, even when they're damaged beyond repair.